All right, I'm walking on top of a mesa in the American Southwest, and at the edge of this mesa, there's a canyon. Down in that canyon, there's a boulder, and on that boulder, there's something crucial, I think, to the story that I'm about to tell you. But tonight I'm gonna set up camp up here on the mesa, and then tomorrow morning, we're gonna head into that canyon and see if we can find that boulder. The sun is coming up and I want to get some shots of this canyon in the morning light, so then we'll head down into the canyon. Now the boulder we're looking for, from what I could tell, is either somewhere in here or about a mile away over here. I just saw a truck coming up the road with a water tank on the back, and it was a rancher who was hauling water for his cattle. And I flagged him down and asked him if he had seen a boulder out here with initials carved on it, and he seemed to know nothing about it. I asked him if he knew any of the history about what went on out here. He said he hadn't. Somewhere out here, a young man carved his initials on a boulder. He didn't know it at the time, but he was carving his own epitaph. That's the thing about these old stories, is it only takes a few generations before they're forgotten. He did point out where there's some petroglyphs up the road, so I think we'll go check those out. Oh, wow. Wow. It's almost like, is that why they say this is haunted? That looks like a figure holding a head. All right, so 2 miles from that point down this way, one of these boulders has the initials on it. all the way to this point. Trekking down that boulder might be a bit more challenging than I thought. All right, I spent the last hour and a half searching all the boulders around this area, so I'm gonna move up the road a half a mile and start looking in the next section of them. From what I know, these initials are fairly large. I think they're 3 to 4 feet across. So we should be able to spot them from a distance. Now, the person who carved these initials was driving a Model A Ford, and he was camping out here. So I've stayed close to the road and I haven't found anything. This boulder is supposed to be at a place called the Seeps. And I asked that rancher if he had heard of a place called the Seeps, and he hadn't. So the Seeps to me refers to a place where water was seeping out of the ground. So what I'm doing now is going deeper, almost to the base of the slope, to see if by chance he parked his Model A and then walked up, I don't know, 100 yards, 200-300 yards from the road. So I'm gonna search this whole area much deeper away from the road. That's the last option, I think. All right, I'm starting to get a little bit excited because I noticed that there's moisture here in the ground. So I'm hoping somewhere in here he carved his name. All right, I'm gonna give you an update. I've been looking for the past 5 hours, 6 hours, and I'm worried I had some false hope. Now, just to be safe, I searched all through that alcove, and I've searched all through here, all the way to that point right there. And I've checked, I don't know, 150 to 200 boulders. I don't think I could tell this story unless I find this boulder, unless I find where this young man carved his initials. Oh. Oh, that's the spot. I got the chills from it. So, I didn't expect to be feeling what I'm feeling. I guess it's not shocking considering what happened here. But I didn't think it would catch me off guard like that. The Utes believe that this canyon was haunted. Whether or not that affected what went down out here is impossible to say. But something very dark happened out here. And I'm gonna head up the canyon to where the story started and see if we could find a cabin. Past this point here, around the backside, is the entrance to the canyon, where nearly a century ago, one man tried to lay claim to this canyon. In range country, most disputes come down to water and grass and who has the right to it. One man had the right to graze his herd here, the other didn't. And deeper in the canyon, there should be a cabin where Clint Palmer stayed with Lucy, a girl who people said was far too young to be his wife. Now, this cabin wasn't much of a home. It was just an old shack left over by oil prospectors who drilled a dry hole. Now, on this old map, there's a drill hole marked here, so I'm guessing the cabin's gonna be close to it. Now, this cabin is nearly 100 years old, so I'm not sure what's left of it or if there's anything left of it, but I'm starting to get closer to where the drill hole is on the map, and I could tell you from here I'm not seeing a cabin, so it seems like there might just be the remnants of one. There's an old post here. Oh, wow. That's a huge piece of timber. Concrete capped. I guess there's nothing left of it with it being over 100 years old. I guess that makes sense. So Clint Palmer was working as a sheep herder in this canyon, and the herd wasn't his, but as payment, he was entitled to a portion of the herd. Now, this was government rangeland, and Palmer didn't have the rights to graze his sheep here. Those belonged to another man, former lawman turned cattle rancher, William Oliver. For months, Palmer was keeping his eye on Oliver, and when Oliver was out of the area, Palmer would take his sheep, push him up the canyon, and let him graze in the lowlands, let him drink from the spring. And him and Lucy would stay in this cabin, and then they would slip back out onto the benches above the river. There was something else that Palmer was doing out here that Oliver didn't know about. Somewhere out here, there should be a dugout. What he wanted to do was establish a homestead and then file on this land, and through the Homestead Act, he would acquire the land. My guess is he had to build it somewhere out of sight where Oliver would never come across it, so I don't know if I'll be able to find it. I have no description of where it might be, but I'm gonna look around a little bit and see if by chance we get lucky. So the drill hole and oil head is right there, and it kind of looks like that's where the cabin was. It seems like he would probably choose to go up canyon somewhere. Oh. Maybe it shows you how delusional Palmer might have been. Where that cabin was is just right back there, so maybe this shows you how bold Palmer was. He just didn't seem to care. Now back in town, Oliver had found out that Palmer had been running his sheep through here. So he needed to protect his livelihood. He loaded up some camping gear into his Model A Ford, grabbed his rifle, saddled up his horse, and he enlisted his 24-year-old grandson, Norris Shumway, to be the driver. And they headed out of town, headed out here towards the canyon. Somewhere near the mouth of the canyon, they came upon Palmer and Lucy. Oliver warned Palmer that he had no business being up in the canyon, and he especially shouldn't be up there watering his sheep at the spring. But Palmer ignored him, and he went up canyon and watered his sheep anyway. So Oliver left. He took his grandson, and they headed out of the canyon, back to the seeps, to that boulder, to that cave, and set up camp. Now with the sun setting, I'm realizing that today, February 27th, was the day that Oliver enlisted his grandson to come out here. It was the day that they ran into Palmer and Lucy. And it made me wonder, why didn't Oliver stop Palmer from heading up the canyon and watering his sheep at the spring? But if I put myself in Oliver's shoes, he had his grandson there. And I bet he felt things escalating. And he knew that Palmer was carrying a gun, and he thought the worst could happen. So what he did is he went out of the canyon, back to the seeps, and set up camp with his grandson at a safe distance from Palmer. And it made me wonder, did Oliver get any sleep that night? And did he have any idea of what was waiting up the canyon for him the next day? What Oliver didn't know, and what no one in the area knew at the time, was that Palmer had taken Lucy. And he was keeping a secret. He had killed Lucy's father with an axe. She was barely a teenager. Back at her home in Texas, he loaded her into the car and hit the road and looked for a place to hide out. And he found this canyon. The next morning, Palmer and Lucy were camping out on the benches above the river, and Palmer told Lucy to set the sheep loose. Palmer knew that the sheep had water memory and knew that they would head up canyon to water. And so Palmer packed up his camp, loaded it into the wagon, loaded his rifle, strapped on his pistol. Lucy mounted her horse, and they started following to catch up to the sheep. And partway up canyon, they noticed the sheep were headed back down canyon. Someone had turned them around. And Lucy spotted a cowboy riding towards them. It was the former lawman, Oliver, and he was running them back out of the canyon. And when he ran into Palmer, Palmer halted the wagon and sat there. Now, I don't know exactly where the next events happened, but from the description I have, it says that a canyon pushes the road or pinches the road in a crease against the canyon wall. So I'm thinking that it's right up here. Now, near this crease, there's a boulder field. So somewhere in these rocks here, Palmer, Lucy, and Oliver collided. Palmer, from the seat of his wagon, said, "Old man, why are you turning my sheep around?" And that triggered Oliver, as you could imagine. Oliver called him an SOB and told him that he wasn't going to be intimidated by the gun that he started wearing around his hip. He said the only way he would leave this canyon is if they carried him out. Now, Palmer at first appeared to back down. He just sat there. Oliver turned around and put his focus on driving the sheep back down the canyon. Palmer got down from his wagon. He grabbed the reins to his horse and mounted it and went after Oliver. Riding up behind him, he just started firing, and a bullet hit Oliver in the shoulder and went down into his stomach. But Oliver somehow got his rifle out and managed to get a few shots off, but really there was no hope. And Palmer climbed down from his horse, walked up and took the lariat of the former lawman, and he wrapped it around his neck. And then he drug Oliver up the road, up to a cliff, and then rolled him over. After Palmer rolled Oliver off the cliff, he got Lucy and came up the road, up the canyon, back to the cabin, and tried to sleep. I can't imagine what Lucy might have been feeling that night, having witnessed what she just witnessed. I can't imagine that she slept much that night. Good morning. Headed up before the sun rises to the site where Norris Shumway camped. With Norris here waiting for his grandfather to return, Norris was carving his initials. Had he heard gunfire echoing in the canyon? Did that send a shock through him? Did he have a completely restless night when his grandfather never returned? He must have been extremely worried. And then the next morning to see Palmer approaching on his grandfather's horse. I wonder if he knew what that meant, or if he just thought his grandfather Oliver was hurt. But he didn't have too much time to think about it. Palmer went for his gun. Norris tried to grab his, and naturally holding his hand up to defend himself, Palmer fired, and it went through his hand and lodged in his shoulder. Somehow it didn't knock him over, but Palmer jumped off his horse and grabbed an axe that was leaning nearby. And he went at Norris with it. Palmer went about trying to clean up the scene. He built a fire where Norris's blood had pooled, and then he put Norris's body in a sheet of canvas, wrapped it up, drug it to the Model A, and loaded it in the trunk. And then he headed down the road down canyon, back towards the benches, towards the cliffs with the river below, and he chose a stretch of road where he could see far in the distance at any approaching cars. And he unloaded Palmer's body and drug it to the cliffside and then rolled it over the edge. But it got hung up on a shelf of rocks 10 feet below. After killing Norris, Palmer came up the canyon. He met Lucy and started packing up his things. He burned Norris's hat, loaded Lucy into the car, and they headed out of the canyon, out of the one road that led out of this place. And they headed across the border into Arizona. Now they got a flat tire, but they managed to steal a car and were quickly back in Texas. He was already wanted for the murder of Lucy's father. Once the Texas lawmen got word that Palmer was on the run in Utah, they thought he might be coming home. Down a dirt road on the Texas plains, the lawmen approached a stolen vehicle, their rifles aimed at Palmer and Lucy. Palmer stepped out of the vehicle and put his hands up. At first, Lucy kept quiet. She still hung on to the hope that Palmer was the only way back to her father. But the lawmen finally convinced her that her father was dead. They showed her his bones. I could only imagine in that moment Lucy staring at the bones of her father. The last bit of hope that she clung to was gone. She finally turned on Palmer and testified against him at his trial. Out of all places, it was Texas, where an axe murderer escaped the electric chair. The jury found him guilty and sentenced him to 99 years. Back in Utah, they found the bodies of Norris and Oliver and put him to rest. When the community senses a threat, they come together almost ritualistically and they hunt down the monster. And they put him away so that he could no longer endanger the community. Sometimes they have to kill it. Norris and Oliver's family never got to do that. They never got to sit in the courtroom and face Palmer, the person that took their loved ones from them. They had to just accept that he was locked away for the rest of his life for the killing of someone else. I don't know if they found solace in that or not. Kind of had a restless night. I was up thinking about the events that happened in this canyon, and I was realizing that today marks 92 years since Norris carved his name into the rock. And I was thinking how not far from here is that petroglyph with a figure that appears to be holding a head. What I kept thinking about was the Ute believing that this place is haunted. You literally have someone who etched a story into the rock 750 to 1,000 years ago, and then something very similar happens. Hauntings are a warning to stay out of an area, or if you do go into that area, you might suffer the consequences. I don't know whether you believe in that. I don't necessarily believe in that. I think at the end of the day, Clint Palmer was a monster who had killed before, and he found his way into this canyon, and anyone who happened to enter it that stood in his way, he was going to kill without hesitation, destroying their lives and the lives of their family. Now, I've been through this canyon over the years, and I had no idea about the history that I was driving past. Now, it has a different weight to it. It's that silence that lingers after someone is taken. They say that after a few generations, no one will visit your grave. That may be true, but somehow Norris Shumway still brings people to the last place that he left his mark.